Okay, so thanks folks for joining us in this Scale Agile Framework Meetup. Today we'll have a chat with Greg regarding a tech unicorn that basically he's rolling Jira Align in to assist their SAFe transformation. I'm not quite sure how much you've heard about Jira Align, but it used to be called Agile Craft, and Atlassian basically tried to put it in because their previous attempt to have a portfolio / program level product actually didn't work. So this is kind of second attempt to fill that gap because it was obvious SAFe needed much more than what Jira provided. So Greg basically will take us through the challenges, the pitfalls, successes, and a couple of next steps what they're thinking about. Excuse me, can you go on mute? Just put Kamal on mute. So basically, he'll explain what Jira Align is, but the idea is to have that enterprise management reporting layer. I used to work with Agile Craft when it was still called Agile Craft, and it's pretty much, it starts with the values. It's a whole hierarchy of about 15 levels. I think, usually we are used to just having, epics, feature stories, tasks, capabilities somewhere in between. But this goes entirely through the company. What's the value of the company? What's the target of the company? How it's organized? So it's really geared for having a whole agile company. Most of all, interesting is, and I met the Elliot was, I think, the first name of the owner of the original guy who kind of created it, and he came to Australia a couple of years back. He was actually telling us how the tool that they use to build Agile Craft is actually Agile Craft, so they could see whether it works or doesn't work. So it's a very, very, very powerful thing. I haven't seen other tool that is so configurable. Example, if you want to, Jira is basically limited. From Epic, you can go just straight to stories. This is totally, whatever you want to do, has the layers, and you can pretty much change if you want to, instead of calling it Epic, you want to call it something else. It does align that. So it's a very, very comprehensive tool. So a couple of things before we begin. Presentation is being recorded, so keep that in mind. Private information, don't share it too much because other people may, your competition or external parties may get access to the recording. Please stay on mute during the presentation. If someone talks, I'll allow them to talk if there's any urgent questions, but there is basically 10-minute Q&A, and we'll try to extend it a bit more. So during the presentation, once you have a question, please post it to the chat box. Question, does everyone know how to use the chat box? That's kind of so just look at the bottom part of, I think by now everyone figured out how to use it. And the other bit is, we will address basically as many questions at the end. If not, we'll try to reach you and answer the questions with together with Greg. So the chat box is also recorded. So at the end, we can see who asked what question and reach you most likely via Meetup. So before Greg begins, any questions? Any questions before we begin? 3, 2, 1. I guess not. So Greg, all yours. Please share.
Okay, great. Thanks, Miha. Share screen 2. Now,
looking good.
Everyone see that full screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so like Miha said, I work for a Sydney company called Nuix. We develop software used for processing structured and unstructured data. We are used a lot in the legal sector and police enforcement, but more now in the risk management and consultancies. So we've been going about 15 years. Sorry, I'll go on to, we're going about 15 years as a pretty small company. Pretty slow development cycle, maybe about releases every 9 months or so, but also pretty unpredictable. Things would slip if they weren't ready. Dependencies weren't well managed. So yeah, we would end up making some changes, breaking lots of things that we didn't realize. So it wasn't that predictable at all. The company underwent a scaling about 5 to 6 years ago, started ramping up, spun up new development centers in the US, and also acquired a couple of other products that complemented the suite. And this then obviously, given the problem of not managing dependencies and interactions and having a lot of the silos, this made things worse and even less predictable. So about 3 years ago, they realized they needed another way of managing the scale, and they adopted SAFe as the preferred methodology. So really the challenge there then was, unfortunately, they rolled out the SAFe at the product and engineering level. So we want engineering to be agile, but the rest of the organization doesn't really need to change. You guys just develop and deliver things every 2 weeks, and then we're going to release things every quarter, and the rest of the organization can stay the same. Sales, marketing, support, none of those guys need to change. So an external consultancy was engaged to help with this transformation, and how they went about it was much more of a kind of consulting view rather than a coaching view. So they came in, they said, we'll tell everyone what to do, rather like consultants, and there was no training, no certification. As you know, on a SAFe transformation, it's always advisable to get, if not everybody, some key roles certified, so everybody learns that SAFe lexicon. One of the other things, Michal touched on it there, the portfolio for Jira, the Atlassian product was the one that was selected to give us that overarching portfolio view. I'm glad to hear him say that it didn't work, because it wasn't just us then. We did spend, so I came on board just after the transformation had kicked off. The consultancy had just finished up, and I tried to get portfolio for Jira working. Didn't have, for maybe 2 PIs, we really tried, but it didn't work. So we just defaulted back to a kind of, ad hoc, each of the products in their own silo. They would manage their own progress, and then that would get reported up to management as that, your burn downs, and this is how we're doing. So it was SAFe in name, but not in practice. And the whole SAFe process and the PI planning process was tailored to the organization. So I think the consultants, they heard what the senior execs viewpoint was of not really, they didn't want to change. So it was very much focused at that product and engineering level. You guys can just work in 2-week sprints, and then everything will be fine. Now, like I mentioned, another challenge which I have never experienced before, while I have worked in global companies with globally distributed teams, I've never in the SAFe context. So we have US teams that are based on the East Coast and also the West Coast. So I don't know if you guys have, I'm sure we all know people in New York, but especially in winter time, as it's going to happen later in the month, 7 a.m. in Sydney is 5 p.m. on the East Coast of the US. So this is hard to convene everybody for a PI planning. my suggestion of everybody meeting in Hawaii once a quarter was met with a lot of resistance, but would have solved our problem. So we had that geographical issue to contend with, as well as the silos and the other issues I've mentioned. Another issue we had was the product suite. So we had Jira, we had Confluence. At the time, we had the Google Suite and Draw.io. So as you can see in that top right one, you can actually produce a program board with Confluence, and it's integrated with Jira. So you get that kind of quasi real-time view of the world. We then evolved to using Draw to try and map our dependencies as we got better at that. But again, from the senior exec's perspective was, well, the teams are delivering, so what's the problem? Again, that connecting the teams delivering to the value we're trying to deliver to the customers was being managed externally to the product development cycle. It's worth saying, you know, the team, like in most places, very dedicated. Everybody had the best will in the world, but due to the combination of lack of effective training, the consultancy coming in going, here's a new process, we'll run through it once with you, and then we're off, meant that trying to coordinate the processes across those geographies was very tricky. There was also a kind of us versus them mentality with head office in Australia and then other product or development teams located across the US. So we had those kind of cultural issues to overcome as well. So the journey. So we had a new VP of engineering. He came on board just under a year ago and had used Agile Craft, which was the previous name, as Michal mentioned, for Jira Align at a previous organization. And then also with his help and also the kind of realization at the executive level that us reporting up all our various silos didn't really give them that portfolio view. It was very hard for them then to tell where their investments were going and then measure the return on those investments. So the new VP, he convinced the Exco to fund the new tool, and we started on our journey. So at this stage, the engineering and product organization had realized the shortcoming of doing things the way we were doing. There was a lot of, when we proposed this change, the uptake and the desire was significant from all the teams. They all knew that there had to be a better way of developing the software and trying to help us scale. One of the other key things it's worth mentioning here was the certification. So we sent people on various courses. So we had some Scrum Masters trained as SPCs. We had people doing RTE training. We had this DevOps training. So we identified a dozen key roles where we sent those people on the training. I think you all know it was like a light bulb moment when they all came back from the training. So the realization was there that we hadn't been doing things properly. So that was the first step, was getting people certified. Then the additional importance and the impact of the certification was everybody then using the same lexicon, the same terminology. So even though we were distributed geographically, when we in Sydney were speaking to our senior leaders, we were using the same language as they were using in San Francisco, New York. And then when those senior leaders were having their own conversations globally, they found that they were all sharing that same terminology. And that really started shifting the dial. And one of the other things that coincidentally the pandemic hit around that time, so we'd all moved from our coming into the office every day paradigm to this new distributed working. And while we have been trying to stay true to the SAFe PI planning, getting people into the room and then broadcasting at 7 a.m. here, 5 p.m. in the US, it was hard in those rooms. You've got a room full of people in Sydney, a room full of people in New York. You've got a couple of different rooms around New York. We've got rooms in San Francisco. I don't know if you know, then having a room full of people communicating with another room full of people is tricky. People can't, or the most common feedback was, can you move slightly closer to the microphone, please? So the pandemic sending everyone home meant we had to do all of this stuff remotely. So the first PI planning we noticed was everybody was at home, and how much easier it was to A, understand, and B, give your feedback during the PI planning. Obviously, there was a lot of additional preparation that, as a Scrum Master community, we had to put in place earlier on. We had to have a few dry runs with people, kind of explain the slightly different context, but it was probably not an over exaggeration to say it was night and day in terms of the experience. We had overwhelmingly positive, I would say we probably satisfaction with the PI planning process went from a kind of 2 out of 5 to a 4 out of 5 after that very first one. And that was simply just everyone being remote. So that was our first kind of, this was before we rolled out the tool. So we knew that we had things to change in how we were doing our PI planning. So for our Jira Align, and I want to kind of stress this isn't really a plug for Jira Align. I don't work for Atlassian, so I'm not going to talk about the tool too much. I'm happy to show a bit of the interface at the end to kind of articulate some of the points and echo what Mihai said at the top of the call. But we engaged an external vendor to help us with the rollout. It's, as he says, it's a pretty complex tool. It's very sophisticated and very configurable. So you do need a little bit of training to pick it up. I would definitely recommend getting that assistance if you're thinking of rolling it out. Product and engineering team, like I said, after that training, they all knew that there was a much better way. So we had those people trained. They could then talk to their peers in the various locations and really start to get this enterprise buy-in from product engineering, agility practice. So the first thing we did was we started our engagement with the vendor. That was about again, because it was all remote, everything had to be chopped up into, instead of having, kind of 4 full-day sessions, they'd have to be chopped into 8 half-day sessions. Then you try and schedule that out over weeks. So what could probably take 2 weeks if you were in a single location with face-to-face ended up taking roughly about 10 weeks. So luckily, as you know, 10 weeks is pretty similar to a PI. So what we did is when we were in the rollout, we used that rollout to prepare for the subsequent PI. Do our training, we prepared for the PI using those old patterns, so Confluence, Jira, all those old things, but we plan to do our execution of that upcoming PI from Align. Then for the next PI, which is this current one, we're doing we're doing the execution in this PI, and we're also preparing for the April PI planning in Align. So it was planned out to address it that way. And then we recently acquired another business unit. So those guys are not that well integrated just yet. So we've decided to keep those off to the side as it's fairly new. And then for the July PI, we're going to have those guys rolled in. Okay, so what did we learn from our rollout? So previously, everything was in a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet. So you all know how hard it is to keep track of things when documents keep getting updated and sent out a new version. So when everybody saw a common backlog in a single tool, and when it got updated, it was updated in that tool, it completely changed the conversation. People knew that there was those dates of having your PowerPoint finished by Friday, that all disappeared. It was a constant iterative process, very much aligned to what we're, how we work day to day. I'm just gonna take a drink of water, excuse me. One of the other benefits was for the engineering teams. So when you integrate with Jira Align, it's across your ticketing system. So we use Jira, but it also integrates with Trello and other tools. But the developers, when they're working on a specific ticket, they can see how that rolls up in the user story, how it rolls up to the feature that sits on top, how that then rolls up to the initiative, and ultimately up to the theme for which that effort is being put in. So it really, where we just had individual features that were going into individual products and people were just focused on their particular silo, where we had initiatives that crossed multiple products, an individual dev could see that his story was rolling up to whatever that initiative was, and therefore could really contextualize the value they were adding to the company. Now, this is, I guess, the learnings. when I talk about this next one, it was more the proof that if you're trying an agile transformation using SAFe, it doesn't work if you just ask the product development teams to be agile and start delivering things every sprint. We need that top-down glue input to glue it all together. So devs up here and the execs. One other thing, and again, like I said, I'm not a salesman for Atlassian. No tool is a silver bullet. As good as Align is, it still has some quirks, still has some bugs. There's quite a high barrier to entry. So training, coaching, and progress of your rollout needs to be tracked. As Michal said, the good thing is that you can do all of this in the tool that you're coaching people. So that was quite a new experience, certainly for me, was we're rolling out this tool and we're actually going to manage the rollout of the tool in the tool itself. So everything got a little bit meta for us. Okay, so one of the other things, and this is kind of separate to Align, I'm sure you're all experiencing this now, was now that everybody's at home, how do we interact with each other? So when we were in the office, we had whiteboards all over the place. We would talk about a feature, a problem, a story. Everyone stands around the whiteboard and sketches it up. So that 2 weeks later, when that feature, you start working on it, you just go back to the whiteboard, turn it around, here's the thing we were talking about. However, there's a lot of distractions when you're in the office. So you're sitting, especially engineers, you're trying to get through a knotty problem. You might have your headphones on, you want to concentrate, and then somebody taps you on the shoulder. Hey, do you want to go for a coffee? Or, hey, what was that thing you mentioned after daily scrum this morning? Things like that. So when the engineers all got home and they found that they have their daily scrum in the morning, some of their refinement sessions, sprint reviews, all of that sprinkled through the week, they actually had a lot of time to focus on those problems. So productivity didn't suffer in our organization. I'd be interested to get people's feedback on this after and their experiences after the call. One thing though, we did find was the online collaboration is still hard. So like I said, that example, you draw it up on the whiteboard, you refer to that, and then everybody's transported back to that moment. What we're finding was when people were collaborating remotely, it was difficult to get people to, not everyone was set up with touch screens and things like that. So we would have conversations around particular stories. We would capture things as you would normally do in the story. But then we found when we picked it up again a week later, 2 weeks later, people's memory had kind of evolved, and anything that wasn't explicitly captured was, oh, I thought we said this. No, we said this. And then we ended up kind of relitigating a lot of stuff. So we found that there was a lot of rework and retreading old ground. One thing we learned was if whiteboards, even on one side, can really help. So if you have somebody who is set up either with a physical whiteboard, I've got one here beside me, or someone with a touch screen who can capture those flow charts and those kind of sketch out what's being discussed and then share that with the group before the end of the call, that's the glue that brings all that together. And everyone then can refer back to those diagrams. And then that big learning there, certification. So getting everybody trained up and certified really helps that coaching abilities when you're trying to get all the team on that journey. So we're there now. I mentioned they were expanding to the portfolio, not in this upcoming PI, but the subsequent one. We need to get this team, this new acquisition, they needed time to get certified themselves. They are going to shadow us in the next PI planning, see how it all works, and then with a view to them being part of another train in the July PI planning. So I'm really looking forward to that. And while I said that we had realized that our product and engineering needed to be, that they can't be the only ones that undergo the transformation, we haven't fully had a chance to liaise with our strategy and finance teams. Our company went public in December. So it's only since then that some of those, the people from those various departments, I've been able to sit down with them. And I'm going to just show another slide that will articulate what I'm talking about a little better. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the part where that top level of value that I was referring to. So down here, we've got our features, Jira epics, and our initiatives. So this darker blue part of the pyramid on the right, this was all pretty well understood. Just this is our test environment, so the data here is not accurate. But where now my next part of this transformation is getting the strategy guys in here, really articulating what our long-term goals and strategies are in this tool. So then the power of Align is that everything is stitched from the mission down, right down to the fundamental features and stories that sit at the bottom, underpinning it all. Then we'll be able to produce objectives and key results along our long-term goals, strategies, quarterly goals. And this is the bit that when I demoed this to the CEO, his eyes lit up, because there are other screens that I won't show because the only ones I do have some sensitive information. But he will be able to look at his strategy, drill down from this strategy room and see where his dollars are being spent and where his return is coming from. So this is going to keep me busy for the next few weeks and months, but I'm quite looking forward to it now. So that was the end of the journey such as it is, and I'd love to hear some feedback from the group, see if any of this resonated with you, if you've got any of your own war stories or things things you found the opposite with as we've gone through this pandemic, and if anyone else is scaling their organization.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Greg. Yeah, we have two. Sandeep, you want to start with your question, and then Dinesh has also posted on the chat.
Sure. Greg, I've kind of tied my question. In your organization, have you been able to actually step away from the traditional PowerPoint dashboards?
Yes, absolutely. So if I go back to the, sorry, I'm still sharing. Let me go back, and I'm going to show you the. So again, this I took this from the Jira website. So this is now, we don't have, this is the program board. And in these menus here now, we have a backlog that sits in its prioritized WSGIF order, but across all the products. We don't have the notion of, here's my PowerPoint that describes my product. And I'll mention a couple of dependencies that I have with this other product. We're now changing our conversations. So we're building our initiatives, and our features are in terms of customer value. And then where the product needs to, where certain products need to deliver their part to achieve that value. That's been the big change and a big aha moment that we've only really been able to ascertain with this tool, because it gives us that view.
Sure. Thank you. Look, I work for Transport New South Wales, and we are commencing a safe journey and at the same time implementing Jira Align.
Okay.
So we have been using Jira and Confluence for a long time, but you need the next level to expose the portfolio views to the directors and the senior level, senior management. So it's good to hear from you that you've been kind of slightly successful in getting that bit of a behavioral change in the organization.
And can I ask where you are in your Align rollout? Are you still at the or have you rolled out Align, or you're still trying to convince?
No, so we are getting we are working with Atlassian to actually, we're just getting our Jira Align configured so that we can start loading our data.
Okay.
Yeah, so still very early stages.
And are you starting with a kind of smaller team, or you're going big?
Yeah, look, so the idea is we go quite big actually, but as in any safe implementation, you kind of start with one art, then you keep adding arts.
Yeah.
So but in terms of loading the data, we have one more tool, Nuix. We're using that for architectural runway and decision on what to do, and then using Jira Align to do a summary of the portfolio.
Okay, yeah, because that's a fair point. Our architecture runway is now just still sits in Lucidchart flow charts, but I guess the difference now is it actually underpins the product roadmap.
Yeah.
Whereas before they were kind of a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, or the dog's tail wagging the cat. Yeah.
So just one more question before I don't want to hog the entire discussion, but did you do SAFe first and then went Jira, or did you do it together?
We went SAFe first, and like I was saying, it was SAFe in name. I think the consultants, they saw the writing on the wall. The execs weren't really that interested. They did the half-day pitch. That sounds great. Go talk to product and engineering and don't bug us. So like a good consultant, you do what the customer asks. Okay. So that's where I found when I came in shortly after that, oh, right, the execs aren't really on board with this. So I struggled, trying to, articulate these points of customer value rather than the product silos. And it was when this tool came in and gave you that nice multiple layered of dashboards that people started, okay, now we get what you're talking about. So the rollout of Align, I've used Rally in the past as well, and that also helps with that same journey. So like I said, I don't work for Atlassian, and it's not, I wasn't trying to make this just about Align. It was having a tool that's able to really show the principles of SAFe makes things a lot easier.
Yeah. It's and I think what I found was that like Jira is good, but you are at a very at this the level at which you operate in Jira that you cannot expose that to you know, senior levels.
That's it. Jira is great for teams.
Yeah.
And if you're a small organization where, you know, 20, 30 people, then you can keep all that stuff in your head almost.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sandeep, for the question. Just to get some other guys in. Dinesh, you're next.
Thanks. Hey, Greg. This is Dinesh. Hey, thanks for taking your time and explaining your journey. I really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions. One kind of resonate with the SAFe in the organization, and one for the tool. So, you know, SAFe is like, you know, Agile is manifestation. It's continuous increment process, isn't it? So, you know, you kind of touched out the point, you know, which is continuous learning, continuous deployment. Was there any KPI metrics that you used? How you measure across the organization, or what's the KPI goals that you met that you guys used?
So that's a good question, and it's like I was saying in that the other slide I showed. That's our kind of next phase, that now I have access to strategy people who really understand what the company is trying to do and their long-term goals. Now we can set those objectives and key results. It was still a little bit of a bottom-up rollout of Jira Align, but as it said on that exact slide, that VP of engineering, he'd had the experience of it. He was able to sell it to the executive committee. And the idea was, okay, let's get into Align first and then execute from it. And then once we have the data there, we can start bubbling it up. And really on that pyramid where I showed you, we are missing some of those long-term strategies and goals. And now we can show that we're in sprint 4 of our first PI. We can show where the progress of those epics and initiatives don't roll up any further to long-term goals, but the executives know that the long-term goals and the short-term goals are sitting above there. And now they've seen, oh, okay, so if we put all of this in here at that strategy level, it will all be linked from the very top to the very bottom. So that's that kind of exciting next phase that I'm working through now.
Excellent. So it pretty much was a change evangelist, you call us, right?
Yeah.
Another question regarding the tool, Jira Align. Used Clarity at New South Wales Parliament. They were planning for it. So how far can we drill down the tool? Like, you know, can we drill? Does it give like, you know, the high program project levels, or, you know, to the project level user boards, like a Kanban boards or sprint planning boards? So does it drill down that kind of a level?
So that's a good question, actually. It does drill down. So it's integrated with Jira, and I can drill down in Align right down to an individual story or bug that exists in Jira. And yeah, it's a kind of a line that I maybe forgot in this presentation, was the Align tool is really for product and senior management. Our engineers and POs, they still work day to day in Jira. So all their sprint planning is done in Jira, their Scrum boards, Kanban boards, however, we have mixes depending on the team. So that was actually one of the other reasons for making this change, was there was very little change in the day-to-day of how engineers work themselves. But all we did was add more visibility for them. So the engineers themselves, they can look up and they all have access to Align. The way the licensing works is it's like a kind of 8-to-1. So you buy 30 licenses,
Yeah.
You can then have 240 users. So the individual engineers, while their day-to-day is still in Jira, so none of that changes, they can actually click up into Align and see those themes, see those overarching. And when we do move to that strategy level and short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, they can go up there and see all that. Because as you know, none of these things are secret. You know, the better you are, the more you're transparent with your goals and where you're trying to go as an organization, and the more people understand it, the more people are likely to be all working in the same direction. And like I said, we went public in December, so all of this stuff is in the prospectus. It's really not secret.
Yeah. Thank you. I had another question, which kind of you covered it. You have a governance policies across the what users can do. See, if the developer has got a visibility of organization goals, it kind of motivates them in a great way that direction what organization is going. So it kind of helps.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then as well, instead of considering dependencies, oh, I need to ask this other product to make a change so I can integrate with them, we're actually two products looking up at this customer value that we're trying to deliver. So it even breaks down that kind of silos and us and them even more.
Oh, sorry, one last question. You mentioned about customer values. How did you integrate? You trying to integrate per customer, the pyramid shape, or the organization pyramid shape?
That's at the organizational level. So, okay. And we're trying, where we had come before was very much that sort of, this customer wants this feature and they're a big customer, so they get what they want. That was, now we're able to abstract that away and say, well, okay, these big customers want this. How do we articulate what they want in more of a generic use case? So then we can build for them, but make it available to other companies in that domain, and hopefully even more generic, so cross domains.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for that, Dinesh. Jerry, you're still here?
Hi, yes, I've just unmuted myself.
Sure.
Greg, how does budgeting work for the increments? Do you follow the SAFe process, or is it by cost center, or what is it?
So that's a good question, actually, and that's part of my, with the strategy and the finance team, and I had a session with them today to show them this. So currently how we're doing it is just, hey, this is how much it costs to run the product and engineering per sprint. So we can say, okay, per sprint, 6 sprints in a PI, this is how much it's costing you. We are looking at using a blended rate. I don't think I'm not going to give too much, not giving too much away, but we're not going to go towards that cost center model. We're just going to have a blended rate across the whole of engineering. We know that it's not going to be an exact figure, but we're still of the opinion that if we can give the execs, instead of talking in story points, we can convert those into dollars, that will be a much more powerful conversation with them. And then they'll be able to see that, okay, I thought I'd spend 3 million on this. I've spent 1.5 so far. What return am I getting? Should I pause, pivot, persevere?
Thanks, Vlad.
Thanks, Jerry. And Darren, you still around?
Yeah, hi, Greg. Yeah, I'm still on the line. Similar question actually to Jerry, and I think you've just answered it. I asked the same sort of question, are you using Jira Align for cost and budget management? Because we are, and we're really struggling. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And how are you using cost centers or one blended rate?
No, we're running an annual budgeting process. I work for a global healthcare company, and we're attempting to store our global portfolio in Jira Align and just find some of the financial management aspects of the tool very poor. Very, very simplistic is probably the best way to describe it. And we're doing a lot of work outside in Excel, PowerPoint, etc., and spending hours and hours trying to reconcile the data back and forth.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I had a session with Atlassian. We're on that call today, and even the consultancy that we got to help us with our journey, it was one of the things they said straight off the bat was, do not use this as your financial system of record. It's not designed for that. So yeah, you're talking with Atlassian?
Yeah, we are. Yep.
Yeah, so I think though even the guy today said also it's not a system of record for finance. So we were only scratching the surface. I'm really just trying to show the finance team, you know, how we could get different views of how the spend is going, but they will still have to do their reporting using those other tools that the existing tools they have. We're certainly not, you can integrate with those, but it's kind of in the too hard basket at the moment. What we want to do, and that's why when I answered Jerry's question, we just decided one blended rate. Let's roll that out. Let's see how then the effort rolls up and maps to those dollar values and see is it giving, and then compare that with the systems of record and see if that's giving what it's giving us. We just don't have the headcount. I think we don't have the people to go down that that road that you've described of trying to get your financials from Align.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, look, and thanks for at least lining up our thought process with what you've heard from Atlassian here locally. So thanks.
Sure.
Sounds good. David, Kave, you guys have any questions? Feel free. Before I have a couple, but we don't have much time, so.
I'm all good, thank you.
Sure thing. And David, yourself? You're on mute, David. Okay, he might not be there. Yeah, a couple of things.
And,
yes.
Good. It's a very interesting conversation. Thanks, Greg. And there's a lot of similarities to the one SAFe rollout that I've been involved in. I've only ever seen Jira Portfolio. I haven't seen Jira Align yet. And it looks to be a lot more intuitive. So I'm really looking forward to having a go at it, and hopefully the organisation I'm with at the moment will implement it.
Yeah, the Atlassian do seem to be pushing it. I know they released advanced roadmaps is what I believe they've released to kind of replace the portfolio, but it was happening around the same time as this, so we'd made our call and we just said we'd roll with this one. Yeah. But they certainly, the conversations I had with the consultant from Atlassian today, they do seem to be on the front foot in trying to promote Align, certainly in the Australian market.
Yeah, there were a couple of advertisements for consultants that they want to employ.
Oh, really?
I was tracking that, yes. So you probably will get good support now.
Yeah.
They are ramping up their consulting arm.
Yeah, because we offered to be a what do you call it, kind of reference case for them.
Yep.
They're rolling out. We want to get a little bit further along so we can give them the better story. Currently where we are now, it's just the execution of the PI in the tool. It's not a compelling reference case yet, but we're hoping by that July PI, we'll be able to say, okay, we've got everything in now from the strategy down, and we're rolling on another art. Look how this is how it all works.
Got it. David, sorry, I might have interrupted you.
No, not at all. No, I don't really have a question. It was more just a comment, and thanks to Greg for sharing his experiences with us.
Cool. Thanks for that. So, yeah, it's good that you mentioned I was very interested that, the teams are still in Jira, so it just sits on top.
Yeah.
Is the synchronization, on a minute basis? Because I remember there was some fiddling with it.
Yeah, you can set it. So we've set it to 10 minutes because just to make sure there's no real issues with performance. But really, we've got product people putting stuff into Align, and then that pushes down to Jira, and then the how often do people really move tickets through columns in Jira? You're moving a few a day, so every 10 minutes seems to be working well for us. Right. But it's one of that, you know, we're kind of tweaking with it. We're tweaking this stuff as we go.
You mentioned initially the execs weren't on board, but did you actually get them trained eventually? Any of them?
Still not. It's so it's a good question. I'm working up the stack.
Good.
Yeah. So our kind of product exec is going on the training next week. And
Good.
I'm hoping that so now we'll have engineering and product execs, you know, they sit on the exco, that they'll be able to say, you know what, guys, you should really do that. Hey, boss, you should do that half-day course. And, you know, the CEO doesn't have time for 2 days of training, but if maybe that kind of pitch, like I still have catch-ups with the CEO, so he's certainly coming on the journey. Like I said, I demoed that strategy room to him today, and he is like, not today, but he can see now the value of it and being able to look, this is your dashboard now. You don't need to wait for these guys to prepare their PowerPoints. Yeah,
that's kind of the number one thing. When I used to work in a big bank, that was the main thing. They were asking us, prepare reports, and I was saying, well, hang on, I'll just take a screenshot. That's it.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't need this screenshot. Well, what do you need? Oh, I need this, this, this. Well, there's that, there's that, there's that. So the other question is, so even though they didn't attend SAFe training, they attended at least some training. You mentioned 4 hours training for the tool.
No, they didn't even do that. This is me, because we're quite a small, there's only 70 of us in the Sydney office, and with the pandemic, there's now kind of only about 40 really back to the office full time. So I can kind of walk past his office from time to time and see he's not on the phone, or little knock, and just give him that sort of update. Like, he is definitely amenable to it, but yeah,
it takes a bit of time to change the focus from email and reports and presentation onto something online.
Yeah, and
very,
like I said, we went public in December, so I don't know how long he was thinking about that for, but I imagine months and months and months.
Yeah, you touched a bit on value. Do you measure value? Do you put a hypothesis in any case, or what level do you use hypothesis, and do you kind of close the loop? Not yet.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Again, this is all the stuff that's really now clear to everyone on that call this morning, or this afternoon with Atlassian. When you show, now that we've got some of that data rolling up, and so we've got our themes in there, we can see broken down by initiative, and then all the dollar values are set at 0. They can all imagine, oh, actually, if this was populated with some dollars, then I would make this a lot easier. The next thing, as we're preparing for the next PI starting in April, we are putting in that value into the initiatives and features. So that's starting to come. But the benefit of that, there's these like little pie charts that show what value have I delivered. So it'll tell you what percentage of story points are done, but then there's also the value attached as well. So we're hoping at the end, in June time, we'll be able to say, okay, here's all the initiatives. We got, or the features, I guess, for PI. We got 70% of this value delivered, but we got 100% of this softly.
Yeah. The interesting, Stephen Elliott, as I mentioned, the chief executive of Jira Align, used to be Agile Craft. I even asked him when he was in Sydney, we had a meeting, and I asked him, well, how do you measure value? And he was just kind of simple. You just ask the customer. And I'm like, well, is that simple kind of thing? He said, yeah, because it's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Same with value. It's in the mind of whomever is using the product. So it's much, hard, I would say, because now you're kind of really not looking just the profitability of the company, not looking at happiness of the customer or some feedback, but you're really, does it add value? And it's much in the product that you have to build it in.
Yeah, and when you're reporting your progress in terms of story points delivered, features delivered, that it's not, those questions aren't coming up. It's just that you're into almost like that's old school waterfall type reporting, your progress report. Yep. Whereas now, what's this field? Why is that blank? Oh, well, this is where we would do this. Oh, I can see that's useful. So.
Yeah, I usually compare it to, you know, in a race car, Formula One. Okay, yeah, it's not the, you know, what are the revs or how much you're pressing the pedal, but, you know, where are you in the race? Are you winning? Are you at front? And that is very, very hard when you're kind of in the system, so to speak.
Yeah.
Look, I don't have any more questions. Actually, I have a lot, but we're at the end of it. Any more questions from anyone, guys? Anything might have popped up? Okay, cool. I think we're good. Greg, many, many, many thanks. I think it was valuable for you too.
Yeah, not at all. No, I had a great time. Yeah, hope the nerves didn't come through too much.
No, it was fantastic. I'll finish the recording so you can hear to yourself. It was on the ball. Perfect.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. And hopefully we'll see you next month. And feel free to suggest, Sandeep, perhaps you can share your experience then from you know, your implementation as well in a month or two. So looking forward to it.
Sure, it's early days. It is a big, you know, it's going to take a while for SAFe to be embedded and the tooling. But yeah, happy to share in maybe 6 months time or 3 months time how we are progressing.
Cool. Well, you know whom to go for any Jira Align question. Go to Greg now. And
yeah, happy. Sandeep, if you want to reach out, yeah, happy to catch up or have a little call and share those stories as we advance as well. And maybe I'll come back here in 6 months for the, I guess it would be the August meetup and update you on how that new release train worked out and whether we've got all our financials in there.
Perfect. Hands for any SAFe questions. It's always the SAFe meetup. Feel free to reach out. Any training, Sandeep, or anything else. Yeah, as you can see from the, it's quite a learning experience. And I think the questions were on the ball. Pretty much we didn't leave anything behind.
Yeah.
It's quite good. Okay, awesome.
Okay, great.
Thanks, guys. Then until next time. Talk soon.
Have a nice evening.